everyone, how's it going? My name is Kiely. I'm from Baseten, and I'm here to talk about my favorite topic in the world, money. Nah, just kidding. My favorite topic in the world, inference. So what I want to talk about today is why agents are so expensive. Again, by way of introduction, I am Philip from Baseten. I've always heard that when you're introducing yourself, you should not use a group photo so people know who you are. So I decided to ignore that advice entirely and show you a picture of all of my buddies from Baseten. We are the pink and green inference platform you've seen all over San Francisco. So, we power inference for a lot of the fastest growing AI companies in the world. And one thing I've learned through this that I'm going to talk about today is, why are agents so expensive to run? And then we're going to talk about a few things you can do about it. The rise of open models and the levers that these have opened up for you to get cheaper tokens. And then we're going to do a really fun launch together related to both agents and money. And then I'm going to give away some free books. Cool. So, question. Why are agents so expensive? Because you guys are paying for Opus 4.6. That's why. Easy question. The real question is, how do you make agents cheaper? And the answer is by using open source models. I mean, everyone knows open source models are cheaper, and they're finally getting good. We're seeing, this is a friend of ours who tweeted yesterday about this with GLM 5.1 becoming a default for their agentic app. The thing about open models, though, is the question is, what actually makes these models cheaper? Is it that OpenAI and Anthropic are super greedy and marking up their inference costs a million times? No, it's not actually that. It's that you start to get a sense of the different levers that you have available to you when you control the inference yourself. Let's talk about open models for a minute. There have been a few different drivers of adoption among open models in agents. And one driver is that the models themselves are getting better. The baseline capabilities are stronger than they've ever been, like we just saw. But it's not just that the models are finally not dumb. It's also that the tasks that we're asking of our models, both closed and open, have gotten much more specific. In the last year, 2 years, there's been a lot of work in agent engineering and in AI engineering, context engineering, better agent frameworks, where we have really well-defined subtasks and, in many cases, months or years of trace data to build upon. And then we also have better harnesses. I think it's been said a bunch of different times. You've heard something along the lines of, even if progress on models stopped today, there's still so much work that we could do with the existing intelligence, with better data, better harness, all that kind of stuff. And open source is kind of an example of that, because if you take what was frontier intelligence 3 or 6 or 9 months ago and apply today's tools to it, you get better outcomes. An example of this is Shopify, who recently saved $5.43 million by switching from GPT to Qwen for one of their agents. And what that required them to do is build a great harness. So we just heard a great workshop from our friends at Master about how to build that. Once you have it, now you can switch over to open models and get really, really fantastic performance at a tiny fraction of the cost. So we think about open models less in terms of benchmark maxing, less in terms of which model is going to close the gap versus whatever the Opus 5 or the GPT-6 of the day is. What really matters is a task-first view of intelligence, where as you're building your agents, a closed model makes it possible. You build a product, you build an agent on the capability, and then an open model comes along, makes it faster, cheaper, and more reliable at scale. And this is great for personal agents, if you're building your own OpenClaw setup. But for companies who are building very large-scale agents, they actually can't wait around for this. So increasingly, they're turning to fine-tuning or RL to sort of accelerate through that transition and get to a potentially even better task-specific open model. So what does adopting open source actually get you, though, when it comes to economics? It's not that open source models are just automatically less expensive. It's that you get levers that you control for cheaper tokens. When you control inference yourself, you have a trade-off that you get to make between latency and throughput. Latency is how fast it runs. Throughput is how much concurrent traffic it can support. And if you are doing a dedicated deployment on GPUs that you control, the more throughput you get, the fewer GPUs you need to serve the traffic, thus your costs go down. So in effect, you have a trade-off between latency and cost. And we have within the world of inference optimizations a sort of efficient frontier between these two, where you can trade off a lot of throughput for really, really great latency. And actually, that's what I usually talk about. So that's what makes this such a fun talk for me, is usually I'm talking about how to get the fastest model possible at any cost. And what we're actually talking about today is more the other end of the frontier, which is how do you get the cheapest possible tokens, and what do you have to give up to get there? So increasing throughput lowers costs. How do you increase throughput? Well, number one, you can just use like smaller models. That's big. You can set a bigger batch size. You can do more KV cache reuse. I know we were just talking about that for the last half an hour, is how to ensure that you're doing cache hits instead of cache misses. You can quantize your model smaller, like really small in some cases. And then you can also do wider expert parallelism in some cases. So let's talk about these levers that we have. Number one, you can just like make a smaller model. There's a couple approaches to this. The first one is fine-tuning, like we talked about. Take a tiny model, which is inherently cheaper and faster to inference, inherently gives you higher throughput. Fine-tune it for task-specific quality. Or you can also distill a large model down into a smaller model. Just make sure that you accept the terms of service before you do that, if you're using a frontier model for distillation. So obviously smaller models are faster and cheaper, but once model size is fixed, what else can you do? Well, you can do bigger batches. Basically, every inference framework gives you out of the box. Is this a laser pointer? Yeah, okay. I'll use my mouse pointer here. Every inference framework gives you out of the box continuous batching, where the requests are coming in and out as soon as they finish, and the batching happens at the token level. This is really great for making sure that you don't have a poor latency on certain requests due to wait time. But with this continuous batching, you can decide what batch size you have. Generally, like the larger batch size, the worse time to first token and the worse perceived tokens per second per user, but the better total tokens per second throughout your system as a whole. So bigger batches, it's one of the easiest levers you have to move along that efficient frontier toward cheap. Second, more KV cache reuse. I'm not going to spend a ton of time here because this was detailed so extensively before, but if you have a matching prefix between multiple requests, you can save a ton of time on prefill. The reason that cache tokens are so much cheaper on a pay-per-token inference API is because it's effectively free to retrieve the KV cache that was already been prefilled and just serve a new request off of that. When you're owning inference yourself, though, you do actually have to worry about cache-aware routing, which is the thing. It now becomes your responsibility to, across your multiple deployments of a model or your multiple replicas of a model, route each individual user's request to the replica that already has the cache warm, or otherwise move the cache between the replicas to ensure that you're succeeding in creating that cache hit. That's an engineering responsibility you take on when you do your own inference versus getting it from a pay-per-token API. Kind of the obvious one is quantization. And I think quantization has like a really bad reputation in the industry, mostly driven by like local inference using int8 and int4 and other like integer formats that really destroy dynamic range within a model and cause substantial quality degradation. I'm actually giving a talk next week at AI Engineer Miami where I'm going to do a 25-minute deep dive on NVFP4 quantization and how to use it to, along with stuff like careful calibration, to preserve quality when you quantize your model, which is the closest thing to a free lunch that we have in inference engineering, because you get better speed on TTFT, better throughput on TPS, and better cost. And then the final lever that we have to make tokens cheaper is to do wider expert parallelism. In many cases, when you have, say, like 8 GPUs and you're running a model across the GPUs, you use something called tensor parallelism to get the best possible latency. That's something that we do a lot. But actually, if you shift more towards expert parallelism, including like very, very wide expert parallelism, if you're so fortunate and GPU rich as to have an NVL72 system, you get a much, much higher throughput at the cost of, again, some latency. So that was a super quick overview. I only have 10 minutes up here. That was a super quick overview of some levers that you get once you move to open models and take control of your inference. There's one final thing I want to do up here, which is a live launch. So Inference Engineering is a book that I published about 6 weeks ago. I've been overwhelmed by an incredible response throughout the industry to it. We've done more than 20,000 digital copies. And the question I've been getting is like, when print copy, when print copy? And a majority of that has actually been coming from India. It turns out it's like actually very expensive to print one of these. We're retailing them for 25 bucks and not really making a penny on that. And then shipping that to India is also very expensive. So in the spirit of agents and money, I am very excited to announce a 825 rupee, that's about $9 US, India domestic printing of this book in full color by Shroff Publishers and Distributors. So if you've got friends in India, let them know. It's launching right now. I'm going to post it here. I'm going to post it here, and we're live. So I worked with this publisher. This is about 65% cheaper than the standard technical book. And I worked with them to find like every single possible angle to cut costs. So I don't make $1 on this. This is just purely to make sure that this material is accessible worldwide. Awesome. And then speaking of how much books cost, I have absolutely free books up here. So after the rest of the talks, I'll be handing them out. Thank you so much.